the next session that is about creating the technology ecosystem for an active archive. And, an active archive easily includes data centers, remote locations, and the cloud, block, object, and file-based storage on, as it's mentioned already, many different kinds of media. It might be an SSD, HDD, tape, optical media, and soon, perhaps even DNA-based storage. And so in this session, we're going to highlight the technologies and solutions that comprise an active archive. So the three key ecosystem concepts here for an active archive are, at the heart of an active archive is an intelligent data management software that can automatically, based on policies and in some cases informed by machine learning and AI, move data to the most appropriate location for preservation and use. An active archive, again, can incorporate almost any type of storage solution and type of media, and that the goal is to use the best combination of these elements to optimize access and cost based on the organization's priorities. So to start us off in this exploration of the ecosystem is Kiyoshi Urabe, business line executive for data retention infrastructure at IBM. And Kiyoshi, what is the role of tape in active archive?
Yeah, thank you, Ken, for the introduction. If you can move to the next slide. Based on 2022 Global Storage Potential Study, tape captured about 46% of deep archive data produced in 2021. And this capture continues to grow each year. The reasons for this continued growth is the need for long-term data retention, where tape platforms operate an average of 7.5 years before data migration. This growth is further driven by the increased, we'll call when, a cyber event will take place, not if, as highlighted in the previous session with Natalie and Betsy, as tape offers the ultimate line of defense from an air gap solution in cyber resiliency plans. The data pyramid is a guide to putting data in the right place at the right time. More importantly, the data pyramid helps organizations plan budgets that bring more value from retaining data. And tape contributes significantly to this data pyramid, notably for deep archives with low TCOs or total cost of ownership. Tape has advantages from a sustainability perspective, as tape has a much lower life cycle CO2e, driven by tape's lower energy consumption. And tape is durable and reliable, further supporting long-term data archives. If you could go to the next slide, Ken. Data represents value to nearly every business. AI and big data are an integral part of that data value creation. The more data that is retained, obviously, the more value that can be derived. And we often hear there's no AI without IA or information archive. And certainly HDDs and SSDs are latency driven, and they are a very important part of the data value journey. But with 40% of active data being in deep archive state, the next step of that AI journey is retaining data for future analysis in a manner that derives the most value for the business. And that's why each year more vendors of object storage software, which here later on, are embracing tape as a storage tier with a native software structure. If you go to the next slide, Ken. So demonstrations in technology are an important to forecast the health of the industry. Tape has demonstrated over 0.5 petabyte per cartridge, and that translates to about 900 petabytes per 10 square feet within a data center for a large or a highly dense tape library system. Tape expansion is not constrained by processor or chip production, which have plagued supply chains recently. This makes tape supply resistant to economic shifts that impact the supply chain. And also around sustainability, again, tape has no generational penalty, as lifecycle CO2e contribution only improves with each generation of higher capacity points. And furthermore, the development team, back one slide, sorry, Ken. The development teams for tape storage are focused on consistent and achievable capacities that organizations can plan on in the future. Tape technology will reach 40 terabytes per cartridge next year, and tape's roadmap will continue to demonstrate greater capacity points, enabled, I should say, by the tape technology that already demonstrated 580 terabytes per cartridge. And in closing, Ken, we are really excited about the future of tape and its continued significant role in data archives. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much for that informative presentation. So tape is alive and well, and especially in terms of archiving data. All right. Very good. Well, next we'll want to hear from Mark Pastor, Director of Platform Product Management at Western Digital. And Mark, to answer the question, how does an active archive fit with flash, disk, and tape technologies?
Thank you, Ken. Hopefully you can hear me. Move on. Yeah, the next slide. So, talking about the various technologies that are pretty active, I think that there's pretty little debate in terms of the relative positioning of these key technologies: flash, hard drive, and tape. And as Kiyoshi just mentioned, tape certainly has a role to play, but that's not to exclude the others. And I think there's going to be a lot of decisions that that you need to make when you're looking at your infrastructure and where you want to invest from a technology perspective. And the answer, of course, is it all depends. I think while nobody may argue the relative position here, there may be debates on whether flash is 5 times more expensive or 10 times more expensive than hard drive. And similarly, is hard drive twice as expensive as tape, or is it very similar to tape? And I think that's where rolling up your sleeves, and that's going to be my recommendation, to really look at your current situation and the solutions that are available to you, because I don't think there's a magic answer that fits everybody. It depends. Next slide, please. By the way, I'll mention, you heard some mention of DNA storage and optical as well. And I didn't include those in the slide. I think we're going to hear more about optical, and so I'm not up to speed on the latest developments there. So I didn't include those, and I think DNA is a little bit further down the road to not be a consideration for today's implementations. One of the things I wanted to say here, so TCO, total cost of ownership, and there's many factors that get baked into the various analyses that people do. There's also a lot of tools that are published by various companies, involved in various technologies or pieces of the ecosystem. And, this is just a recent analysis. I took the numbers off because my point here is, you can see that there are analyses that might show, hard drive total cost. This is a 5-year analysis. Some of the key things people typically always look at is, what's my cost of power? I think you heard Kiyoshi talk about, that piece of it. And so, acknowledging here, hard drive will consume more power, but this may give you an idea of the orders of magnitude of those costs relative to the total costs that you may incur. Floor space is another one. Some people account for that, some people don't. It's maybe just be an overhead factor in some environments. And so what I'd like to suggest for the readers, for the listeners here is, it's important to do your own TCO analysis based on your situation and based on the alternatives that you're considering. And I would say that, that you're going to not be able to leverage too much the tools that are out there. They'll give you an idea, but I think they can vary wildly, depending on what your particular situation is. So hopefully this gives you a sense of some of the things that you would consider, what some of the orders of magnitude might be, and then do your own analysis. Next slide, please. Yeah. Move on. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Okay, so then, I think this is going to reinforce a lot of what you've heard so far. There's with flash, that's clearly going to be oriented toward the high performance processing operations. There is certainly a multiple of the cost of flash over the next tier, which would be hard drive storage. So people would be reluctant to necessarily go completely flash within their total environment. Keep your costs down by focusing that on the high performance operations. Then hard drive, which used to be a performance workhorse, has really moved because flash is so accessible and the cost of flash has come down substantially. Hard drive really fits a pretty broad middle ground. in terms of where it can be leveraged, anywhere from an active workflow, which isn't quite as performant to need flash. But I think as you saw, the previous slide that was presented talked about 46%, I think was the number of deep archive data being stored on tape. And that's just to say that there's another 54% that's stored on something else. And that could be optical, it could be hard drive. And so it depends on how big your deep archive is, how complex your ecosystem needs to be in terms of managing the various technologies and the tiers and all that. And hopefully that TCO I showed you on the previous slide says, hard drive can actually be quite cost competitive depending on the solution that you're looking at. And so, it does depend on how big the scale of each of these tiers needs to be for your own investments. Certainly, I reinforce what was talked about in terms of air gap. I think tape fits a great role there. And so you may end up, implementing, tape archive, for that reason. And if you have it on board, then leverage it, as broadly as you can. So that's kind of my thinking. The one last thing I want to close with is, given that I'm in the systems side of Western Digital, one of the strategies that I think people need to think about is when you talk about flash or hard drive storage, what a lot of the cloud providers are doing, and I think a lot more enterprises are doing as well, is they're disaggregating their storage. And so, don't think about, storage as being part of an application server. You should make sure you're thinking about storage as being an external storage container where you can share, that storage amongst many applications and many servers. Otherwise, you're not going to really, be able to scale or get the best bang for your buck on the various technologies. And tape is always disaggregated, so think about the other ones that way as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing those insights with us, Mark. Yes. Okay. And next, we'll hear from Steve Santamaria, CEO of Folio Photonics, on the role of optical in active archives. Steve.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Ken. And before I go to my slides, I just want to thank the Active Archive Alliance for inviting Folio to attend and to become a member, as we're kind of a nascent technology in this space. And I just appreciate it to be with all the incumbents that have been here for years and years. So thank you. Putting this together, we look at optical. I have a couple fun facts, and everybody has used optical. It's kind of what attracted me to this in the first place. 265 billion discs have been shipped in the history of optical. At one time, it was a very dominant technology, and it was very perfect for consumers to transport media, being robust on them, long-lasting, very durable, just a real solid product. And that was kind of a mistake on their part too, because it's very ill-suited for enterprise data storage. They never really developed a long-term roadmap past the current kind of Blu-ray levels right now, which is the size of a movie, and which made it very, very expensive to put into the enterprise. And then, frankly, they're making too much money selling consumer products, so they didn't do any R&D down the path. And so when World started streaming video, there goes the optical, most of their market. And but we, companies like Folio that are starting to emerge as kind of, dust that back off and take a look at it and see what problems you can solve. So let's go to the next slide. So I don't want to give you a pitch on Folio. I want to talk about optical. I want to talk about it, archive storage. I said, listen, we look at it as this is the industry's aspiration. This is, as a customer, this is what you should be thinking about. And I just made a fun little thing off of the word archive. Affordability is more and more into play when we look at, in 2025, 2.7 zettabytes of capacity are going to be required for archiving data. And that's a phenomenally large number. And it's almost a number that exceeds the total manufacturing capacity of the industry and only goes up. The industry's growing at a 30% CAGR. And so really the opportunity is we're going to need more and more archive technology to help manage it, because it's a challenge, and it has to be affordable, because, it's one thing if you're storing a petabyte of data, but when you're doing an exabyte of data, all of a sudden you're realizing that's a significant bill. And it shows up in the CEO's, on the inbox that we're spending all this money for storage. And it's, and you don't want to get in a situation where you have to delete, right? No one wants to do that. You don't want to do data triage. You want to sit here and say, all right, we want to save everything for all these great uses that are coming out, or against disaster recovery and things like that. But you don't ever fall short of it. I put random accessible. More and more, the archive data, the active archive data, is being used. Right? We talk about AI and machine learning. I love that quote, no AI without IA. Sorry, I'm going to steal that. I forgot who said it, the speaker before me. It's very true. The rise of machine learning, the rise of all these technologies saying, I need more data. I have never met a data scientist that wants to analyze data and says, give me less data. They all want more. And that's just the reality. We've already talked about the cyber resilience for C. This is critical. It's incumbent on this industry for us to put solutions out there to solve that problem. When you read and that it's $1 trillion being spent on cybersecurity and cyber threats, and those numbers are just staggering. And the fact that if you lose your data for more than a week, all of a sudden your company's gone, right? Business continuity is threatened. It's something here that as an industry we have to aspire to try to resolve and help customers deal with it. A high capacity roadmap, again, it's the zettabyte era. We as an industry, whether it's optical, tape, and I saw the tape roadmap, which is fantastic, and HD, I've seen those also. And then there's the DNA guys, is we need more capacity. And everybody has to drive to it. It's not about sitting on our laurels here. And it's just figure out a way to do this in affordable means. Immutability, this is all about, protecting that data. You're exposed to a lot of things. Not all data is inside of the data center, and there are risks inherent with heat and cold. And you see what just happened in the UK when they had the big heat wave, caused a big problem. And viability, you want the data to last longer. I had a conversation with a hospital, and they want to store patient data for life of patient plus 30 years. That's 100 years of archival data. And so you start thinking about all the remasters you have to go through, and they don't want it on their active system. They want it so that, hey, if you're in a car accident, they call you up, boom, you're going to move that data up into a hot layer, use it to cure you and take care of you. And they said typically within 30 days, 90+% of patients are done and out of the system, and drop it down in the archive as quick as you can. It's managing that up and down. It's going to be key. And then more and more and more sustainability and it being eco-friendly. People are talking about that clearly. Our analysis is that 3% of energy today goes to power data centers, growing to 10%. It's untenable future. We have to look at means to kind of reduce the energy usage inside of data centers. It's a crazy number, and it doesn't have. And it's internationally, it's even a bigger problem to industries. Like I saw a report that said Japan, 18% of electricity goes to data centers in Japan. It's crazy numbers, crazy volumes, and you look at all the uses of electricity. So how do we get there? And the next slide, Ken. I just kind of check the box. You can follow up with me, but there are new S curves. There are new dollar per terabyte numbers coming out. Yeah. Optical has an opportunity, we believe, through the affordability, the random access, resilience, and our capacity. I don't have our roadmap, but there are roadmaps out there. You can see it. But it's kind of a really unique product that's having some breakthrough moments. I'm starting to see beyond my own company, other optical technologies kind of start trying to bubble up and rise through it. So really, I look at and thank the Archive Alliance saying there are new technologies coming. The DNA guys aren't here on this show, but and I know the roadmaps for HED and tape have new products also that we're all working it, but we should aspire to greatness here.
Very good. Thank you so much for sharing those insights, Stephen. Appreciate that. Wow. All right. Archive, ARCHIVE, right? All right. And next we'll hear from Thomas Thalman, CEO of Point Software and Systems, to discuss why software is a key factor in the active archive infrastructure. Thomas?
Yes, thank you, Ken. So, as we all know, an active archive deployment consists of hardware and software components. And while the hardware components are mainly used for the physical storage of data and for the networking, it is a software that ensures that an active archive can be homogeneously integrated into the IT installations, and that the software is the element that makes it independent from specific technologies. So we can use hard disk, tape, and optical, but it is the responsibility of the software just to abstract from the physical layers. So furthermore, software ensures that active archive data can be accessed transparently, which is very important, just to use the value of archive data and to have some operational benefit from this. So transparent access to active archive is a very important aspect to consider. And additionally, of course, software can, for example, perform background migrations. When we speak about archives about decades, it's necessary that we migrate data from legacy systems to new systems and new technologies. So all these aspects have to be covered by software, and a possible deployment is shown on the next slide, and we think that these requirements could be fulfilled by using a software-defined object storage. We think that object storage is perfectly suited and designed for archive for large amounts of inactive data, and the object storage approach provides a lot of benefits, especially for archiving data. Additionally, we have a standardized interface. We have the S3 interface, which is an industry standard and which allows that object storage can easily be integrated into existing storage infrastructure. And we know that more and more clients and applications do support S3. So it's a perfect protocol for integration purposes. And if the software-defined object storage is able to support different technologies under one single namespace, so to have one API, and under this API we have different technologies like disk and tape and also optical in future, then we can benefit from the advantages of different technologies without handling all these different capabilities. So an object storage gives us the perfect deployment to use the benefits of different technologies just under one namespace. So in summary, we think that a software-defined object storage would be a perfect approach just to realize an active archive.
Very good. Thank you so much, Thomas.
Thank you.
And next, let's talk to Dean Feliciti, the Director of Data Risk and Remediation at Sullivan Strickler. I'm looking forward to hearing from you, Dean, about what are some of the software complexities pertaining to legacy data.
Great. Thank you, and thank everyone on the team. It's been very informative thus far. And before I get started, I may need to apologize because one of the benefits of working from home is working from home. But one of the challenges is when you're sitting in the middle of a massive thunderstorm, there's always a risk. Thank God I put stuff to tape. So there you go. So anyway, so I'll do my best here. So the software life cycle is not unlike the hardware life cycle over time, which becomes unsupported, obsolete, falls into end of life. So the accessibility of existing planned and expiring archived data, I guess also including for the sake of disposition, is vitally important.
Yes.
I think when we look at the current state of where we are in dealing with software technologies and handling active archive data, we play a major role in the requirements and understanding what we have, including the current and to be implemented privacy rules like CPRA, Colorado's CPA, Utah's UCPA, Virginia's VCDPA, Connecticut's CTBA, lots of acronyms. But not only are we required to report on what we're storing through software, utilizing software on hardware, we need to be able to remediate information as required. And to do so, we're utilizing and dealing with many different software platforms. So the consumer the regulators, the compliance folks, they don't care how we get there as long as we get there. So with that, there are certain complexities around dealing with the software technologies. Obviously, because in dealing with many other platforms, it can become challenging. Primarily the software for archiving was for that. It was for archiving, for business continuity. And then aforementioned privacy obviously plays a massive role. And now with more organizations implementing information governance officers, data compliance officers, data control officers, stricter compliance, regulatory, corporate rules, legal discovery requirements, discovery demands, where cases now are touching back of historical nature. So we have to utilize maybe existing software or create a protocol in which we can gain accessibility to data that may no longer be, quote, active, but actively archived. And obviously there's many platforms. If you're talking about different business units, different city agencies, some have been in existence since the 70s. So having the ability to utilize technology to gain access to data and information becomes vitally important. And like was mentioned by some of the panelists, like having the ability to remediate decommissioning end of life, not only hardware, but software. How can I certify the fact that, yes, we've brought down these physical environments and these backup platforms, but how can I certify that, yeah, they're down, but I can still recover? So that becomes very important, as well as data mapping all your active archives. You can go to the next slide. Here's just an example of some platforms that are out there, which will basically grab all metadata for data around the data that you're archiving. So you can, not necessarily have to build this massive amount of data for hosting and review, but you can put it in one of those offline archive or active archives, but just show what you're storing through metadata, at which point you can then, when a request comes in for regulatory or for discovery or for end of life, you can produce based on metadata results. And then if you can go to the next slide, Ken, we can, I'm sorry, you can back up. Sorry. Yeah, you can back up one more. I'm killing you right now. Yeah, so, some of the things that we may see is, there may be limitations to the software that have been employed early on. But if you can get executive sponsorship and some of the folks to buy in, say, listen, we still need to legally be able to deliver on what we're housing. What are we archiving? Again, especially with the privacy rules changing, et cetera, it becomes a bit more onus on us as a collaborative, as a unit, to be able to portray what's being stored in our archiving platforms. And with that, I'm looking forward to hearing the next speaker.
All right, very good. Thank you. And that next speaker will be Dave Thompson, who's the SVP of Sales and Marketing at QStar Technologies, to talk about the benefits of using tape as cloud. And Dave, tell us about that.
Thank you, Ken.
Yes.
Look, I just wanted to start off with the sort of recap of where we all came from, really, as software vendors working in the active archive space. So we work with this term tape as NAS, where we present tape libraries and, of course, other archive storage technologies as well through an SMB or NFS interface. So providing a file system, a NAS style approach to storing content for long-term archive. You can use data migrators to move that content in, or obviously a manual move, or you can use applications that support the ability to move content into a longer term archive. So, this has been around for 30 plus years in different forms with different storage technologies and so on. But this is the base technology that we've, as a software providers, have been promoting for multiple decades in the active archive world. So if you just want to move on to the next one. So this is where exactly what Thomas was talking about as well, is the new concept is tape as cloud. So S3 became a significant interface that allows organizations to use that instead of, or as well as SMB and NFS. So we now have sort of three options. In fact, if you've actually had QStar for a while, you can add S3 as another option to be able to pull the same data that you've written out through SMB. You could pull it out through S3 now. So again, for remote workers and such like, it provides different views and different opportunities. Again, all of this, I've got a single store at the back end, but you can replicate this content out to multiple stores. So again, working with object storage and tape, or cloud and tape. And that's really what we would wanted to talk about here is where would you use tape as cloud? There's an awful lot of content being stored in deep archives in cloud providers. And of course, getting access to that again can be difficult, particularly if you're looking for bulk downloads or project-based systems, because it's very slow to pull content out en masse from cloud. So if you can just move on to the next slide, please. So why would we use tape as cloud? Many organizations are already familiar with using tape, and we know that potentially it can be significantly lower cost because of lack of egress fees and such like. So having that content available also means that you have that predictable cost model. You don't suddenly get monthly fees that are going way up because you've had to pull a project back from your archive space in the cloud. Potentially significantly higher performance, again, not for small retrieves, but certainly for large bulk or project retrieves that you may have. You can pull that from your tape system much faster. And again, higher security potentially. We can do rollbacks based on data stored. So even if your data is corrupted online, we can actually roll back to a position before that actually happened. And then, of course, we're talking about, significant risk to organizations that have very large capacities over a petabyte stored in cloud, particularly if those organizations were to fail or decide to go out of business. How do you now get your data back in a timely manner? So we believe that adding tape as cloud to an existing system through replication allows you to get the benefits of both worlds. You can have data in your cloud and have an extra copy in your remote environment using tape as cloud.
Very good.
So let me just finish with a couple of quotes. It's on to the last. So again, these are not my quotes. These are other people's, but you can see that from Google's, and this is a little while ago as well, they were trying to promote their transfer appliance, but you can see how long it would take for you to write at 100 megabits a second, which of course is probably not relevant today. Maybe organizations are much faster than that. But, multiple years compared to the SpectraLogic quote, which is talking about 1.8 petabytes in less than a day. So thank you, Ken.
Certainly. Well, thank you, Dave. All right. Well, that takes us to the Q&A that's come in for this session. And let's see. Okay. A question here is, I have an old tape library with LTO5 drives and media that I previously used for backup and no longer am using. Can I use that old tape library for tape as cloud? Or does everything need to be new?
So let me answer that one. Yes, you can use any tape library that the software vendors currently support. And I'm sure that all of our people on the call will support anything. So we still support LTO1 and we support all enterprise class. And of course, going forwards, we'll also support organizations like Folio. So you'll be able to do a optical as cloud solution in the future.
Right. So for them, the main exposure might be, can they continue to, get devices that'll let them access that data? But again, with backwards compatibility of the LTO standard, that shouldn't be a significant problem either.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you've got the system out there, then the total cost of ownership for a tape as cloud system goes way down at that point if you've got a system sitting around doing nothing.
Very good. Right. Okay. And I think this question came up during the Western Digital presentation about how would you compare the roles that tape and hard disk drives play in an active archive? I mean, we've heard a lot about tape, but how would you compare the roles of tape and HDD in active archiving?
And I think the reason that it might not be a crisp answer to that, as I said during my session, it kind of depends, right? So there are organizations that may need all of their data to be actively accessible, faster than maybe what tape might accommodate. And they would lean more, to a higher percentage of disk for retaining their data. And there may be organizations that have a lot of what we call cold data, where it's okay if it takes, a little bit more time to restore those files back to something that can be usable or searchable or processable or whatever. I think that may be one of the differences, as I mentioned back to the Kiyoshi slide, about 46% of deep archive data is on tape. It might be how you define deep or cold, right? Do you need it to be accessible or not? And how big is that? And how much will it cost you to implement multi-tiers versus single tiers?
Okay.
But that's about the best answer I could give. Yeah.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, thank you for giving a shot at that. Anyway, we from multiple presentations, we talked about accessing tape, content on tape from either using NAS protocols or object storage. And there's a question here, why do you think object storage, especially in combination as tape, is well suited to active archives? So would one of the gentlemen who addressed that?
Can let me answer this. I think it belongs to my presentation. Yes, so object storage compared to file system is designed for massive amounts of data. And okay, this fits perfect to tape. Tape has high capacity. Another argument is that object storage is intended to ingest complete objects, so there is no random block access. And also this fits perfectly to the sequential character of tape. Then we have functions like versioning and object lock, which prevent that data and objects can be changed. And this is the same with tape. So also this fits together. And then we have these functions like erasure coding for redundancy. And this could also be realized, for example, by using multiple tapes in an erasure code.
Okay.
And additional argument is the S3 protocol, especially compared to file system protocols. S3 protocol is very simple, and it provides means for handling, for example, high access times and timeouts. And especially these things has to be considered when using tape and tape libraries. So all these things fit very well together and make sense in the combination object storage and tape.
Got it. Thank you. And then a follow-up question, I guess, that came up in my mind as you were answering, Thomas, is, if you're using object storage protocols to access tape, doesn't the solution have to manage that metadata someplace other than on tape in order to provide some reasonable level of performance or access, or how does that work?
Yeah, the S3 protocols gives a lot of possibilities to handle metadata. So it's in fact, it's not limited. We can compare to file systems where we have a very limited attribute possibilities. So, but with S3, there's no difference between metadata and object data, and we keep this completely together. So for us, it's a data stream. It includes object data and metadata, and everything, of course, is stored on tape.
All right, very good. Did anyone else want to weigh in on that question?
I can just say something. I mean, yeah, when everything uses cache, that's part of it, and all of the metadata is retained on cache. So, and that cache can be, well, we recommend NVMe now. So content can be stored there, and then you can do very quick searches of the metadata stored without having to go to the back end at all completely.
You don't have to cycle through a bunch of tapes to figure out what data is on what tapes, etc. Yeah, very good. Okay. Let's see, other questions. Looks like this, there were some questions that came in that related to the Sullivan-Strickler presentation. And that the question is, what are the biggest hurdles or latest trends and the future of software as it relates to accessibility?
Sure. I think I touched on the hurdles a little bit. Obviously, there's limitation in software itself. So in dealing with decommissioned environments, discovery of historical nature, etc., technology itself could be limited. So then obviously the approach to gaining accessibility and data mapping can be a challenge. Also, more of an administrative standpoint, it's getting executive sponsorship. So who pays for it? So ultimately, we can all agree, especially everyone on this call, the importance of active archiving, data accessibility through not only hardware, but software, proprietary for some, but who ultimately pays for it, which part of the organization. So by having executive sponsorship, that helps drive that. With regards to latest trends, I would say that, we're seeing more enterprise-wide type software platforms that handle archiving, including journaling, and have some InfoGov component to it. So there's a constant means at which some clients, some corporations, some government agencies are now doing a better job of tracking what they have, what they're storing, what they're pushing offline, what they're putting to even their air-gapped environments. They're doing a better job of tracking and maintaining that through a combination of very cool software that's out there, as well as some hardware solutions as well.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Yeah, those certainly could be challenges. I was IT administrator at 3 different private colleges and universities, and the archivist dealing with those folks and their concerns about, formats that go out of date, and even for for electronic files especially, kind of things. But that software is no longer being supported by a company. What do you do to access the data that you saved using their proprietary formats and all that? So yes. All right.